We can turn to Ukraine now, where President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has renewed his appeal for more powerful air defenses after Russia launched its biggest airstrikes in weeks. At least 25 civilians were killed in the air assault on several cities across the country early Friday.
The first large-scale air attacks on Ukraine for almost 2 months prompted renewed calls by the Ukrainian president for its Western allies to supply more air defenses.
Our Air Force managed to shoot down most of the Russian missiles, 21 out of 23 fired. And it proves once again that you can only stop terror with weaponry, air defenses, modern aviation, without which air defenses cannot be fully effective, artillery and armored vehicles.
One of the Russian missiles that evaded Ukraine's air defenses hit an apartment block in Uman, a city far from the front line. It killed dozens of people, including children. Residents watched the rescue crews in grief.
My neighbors are gone. No one is left.
In Kyiv, President Zelenskyy met with the leaders of the Czech Republic and Slovakia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
They remembered the victims of the latest strikes with a minute of silence. Later, both countries signalled their support for Ukraine joining the Western military alliance, NATO. But for now, Kyiv has to rely on the weapons systems it already has in place to protect its people from future Russian attacks.
Let's cross now to DW correspondent Matthias Böllinger in Kyiv. Matthias, this morning there are reports that a fuel tank has caught fire in the Crimean port city of Sevastopol following an alleged drone attack. What more do you know?
Yeah, it seems to be quite a big fire. We've seen pictures of several fuel storages there burning. It's not the first time that Ukraine has attacked targets deep in Crimea. The bridge that connects Crimea to Russia has been hit by Ukrainians. Airfields have been hit. Nevertheless, every one of them is, of course, a difficult operation because they need to get quite far into Russian-controlled territory either via the sea or via land, and Sevastopol is, of course, a very symbolic target because it's the seat of the Black Sea Fleet, the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So it's, of course, a sign that Ukraine is still laying claims to Crimea. Its aim is to reconquer Crimea, and that was a very powerful sign that they are not relenting from that.
Several cities were struck in Russia's biggest airstrike this week. Is there a belief on the ground that this might be Russia's new strategy to unleash massive attacks far and wide?
If it was, it wouldn't be completely new. Civilian buildings have been hit throughout this war quite often, and if anything, Ukrainians are just confirmed that Russian tactics are basically to scare people, to inflict harm on civilians in order to break the morale, a terrorist tactic, as people call it here in Ukraine. This one was one of the most deadly attacks that we've seen, but it's by far not the only one. Buildings, especially in cities like Zaporizhia, Dnipro, Kharkiv, that are closer to the front line and can be reached by a number of rockets, have often civilian buildings have been hit.
Matthias, as you well know, there's much anticipation about a counter-offensive from Ukrainian forces, perhaps in the coming weeks. Do you think attacks like these would change Ukraine's plans or perhaps even accelerate them?
attacks on civil objects, on residential buildings, do not inflict a lot of harm on the military, so they do not harm the military's capacities. Now, we don't know a lot about this planned offensive, where it might take place, how strong the Ukrainian army really is. Very conflicting information on that. So there are lots of question marks. The Ukrainian military is very good at keeping their plans secret in order to launch a surprise attack on Russia or to attack in surprising locations or by surprising tactics. So we don't know a lot, but I doubt that this kind of attack will deter the Ukrainian army from attacking the Russians. On the contrary, Ukrainians after these attacks really rally behind their military, and the public opinion here is that these territories, they need to be taken back in order also not only to keep safe the people who live there, but also to keep safe the people who live in other parts of Ukraine, like in Uman, which is quite far from the front lines.
Understood. That is our DW correspondent, Matthias Berlinger. Many, many thanks.